Seeing a quorum, we'll go ahead and get the committee started here. I want to wish everyone good afternoon, and we'll call this meeting of the Small Business Committee to order. The federal government spends nearly $500 billion through prime contracts each year. Ensuring that small businesses can compete for these contracts offers several benefits: business growth, job creation, greater competition, lower prices, and innovation. Over the past few months, this committee has been looking closely at issues that are keeping small businesses from competing. As a result, 7 of our members have introduced contracting reform bills. Working closely with our colleagues, I included those bills plus many other provisions into H.R. 1481, the bill that we're considering this afternoon, the Small Contractors Increased Competition Act of 2015. I believe that by marking up this bill today, we'll be taking an important step towards increasing small business participation in federal contracting. The legislation we're marking up today really is a collection of bipartisan, common-sense reforms. H.R. 1481 seeks to reverse the declining participation rate for small businesses in federal contracting at both prime contract and subcontract levels. A strong small business industrial base is fundamental to the health of our national economy. Make no mistake, as we've heard at both full committee and subcommittee hearings, our industrial base is at risk. Within the past 2 years, we have lost over a quarter of the firms who were registered to do business with the federal government. That means over 100,000 small businesses have stopped even trying to do business with the federal government. As a result, we are seeing a decline in competition. There was a 60% drop in the number of contracts actions with small businesses over the past 4 years, and the contracts just keep getting bigger. This declining number of contracting actions with small businesses cannot simply be explained by shrinking budgets or sequestration, because during the same period, contracts actions with large businesses increased by 8%. However, the dollar value of the average contract action with a small business increased 230%, meaning that fewer small companies are getting contracts, but the contracts they are getting much bigger. This demonstrates that we have a declining small business participation rate, which threatens the core principle of competition upon which our entire contracting system is based. It is basic supply and demand. When there are fewer offers, prices go up. I want to emphasize how important these issues are to both small businesses and taxpayers. For this reason, the committee has received testimony supporting provisions of the bill from the following organizations: the American Council of Engineering Companies, Mechanical Contractors Association, Women Impacting Public Policy, Veterans Entrepreneurship Task Force, the American Legion, and the Professional Services Council. The bill has also been endorsed by the National Defense Industrial Association, Mid-Tier Advocacy, Associated General Contractors, the American Institute of Architects, and the National Electrical Contractors Association, among others. When small businesses compete for these contracts, something important happens. Jobs are created. Innovation occurs. Competition brings down prices. In short, when small business wins, we all win. This is our first markup on contracting issues, but it will not be our last. These issues are simply too important, and I now like to recognize the ranking member, Ms. Velasquez, for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And before I make my opening statement, I would like to introduce to the committee our newest member, Representative Seth Moulton from Massachusetts 6th Congressional District. Welcome to the committee.
Welcome.
A former Marine and businessman, he served in Iraq. Mr. Moulton's experience as an entrepreneur and in the military should be both useful on the Small Business Committee as we work to strengthen the small business sector and address issues related to veteran-owned small businesses. I'm pleased he has joined the committee and look forward to his contributions. Mr. Chairman, gaining access to federal contracts has always been a top priority for small businesses, and given this, it is appropriate that it is the subject of the first bill we marked up in the 114th Congress. By providing small firms with another customer, one that happens to be the world's largest buyer of goods and services, these opportunities can make the difference between success and failure. It is not just small firms that benefit. The government does too. Dispersing procurement spending more equitable broadens the government's supplier base, promotes more competition, and also spurs job creation throughout the country. Taken together, this is a win-win for small businesses and taxpayers. On many levels, however, small firms continue to face challenges in gaining a foothold in the procurement marketplace, and some of these very matters are addressed in H.R. 1481. For starters, they lack the internal capabilities that the larger counterparts possess, making it harder for them to compete. Without dedicated technical staff, even submitting a bid can be difficult, making it hard for these companies to identify an opportunity and take the first steps. There is also the very real institutional bias that agencies show for consolidated contracts and so-called procurement innovations, which place small businesses at a distinct disadvantage. These new mechanisms are proliferating at an increased pace, and the more we see, the more we know that small businesses are an afterthought in most federal agencies. Perhaps most frustrating is the lack of accurate small business contract data. Year after year, large corporations are listed in the small business goaling data, with even the current SBA administrator acknowledge their inclusion just the other day, participating in our committee hearing. Until we can clean this up, we will be unable to truly know if the federal government is making good on its commitment to small businesses. Given these broad challenges, small firms will always need tools and resources, such as those advanced in the bill before us today, to level the playing field. Whether it's contract set-asides, technical assistance, or statutory protections, this committee has made it a priority to help small firms access federal contracts. As the procurement process continues evolving, we must be responsive to their needs so that they are not left behind. With these concerns in mind, I'm pleased that we are considering H.R. 1481, which strives to make improvement in this area. Empowering more firms to grow with the government as a customer can be vital to not only the small business sector, but our economy as a whole. With that, I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much. Members are asked to put opening statements in the record, and we'll now move to consideration of H.R. 1481. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1481, to amend the Small Business Act to strengthen the small business industrial base and for other purposes.
Without objection, H.R. 1481 is considered read and open for amendment at any point. I have an amendment in the nature of a substitute, and then the clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1481.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read. I want to thank the ranking member, Velazquez, for working with me to develop a bipartisan amendment in the nature of a substitute. It's a tribute to the ranking member and to this committee that the first bill we mark up this Congress is one where we've achieved a bipartisan consensus, and I personally appreciate her hard work to make this happen. This amendment will allow us to do the following things: reverse the decline in small business subcontracting, hold agencies accountable for identifying, justifying, and mitigating bundled contracts, ensure that small business advocates receive the proper training in a cost-effective manner, make it easier for small businesses to work together to pursue large contracts, give small businesses the necessary information to challenge contract bundling and consolidation, prevent new supply chain burdens from being incorrectly applied to small service contractors, and crack down on the abuse of reverse actions. I also want to thank Representatives Bost, Curbelo, Hardy, Knight, and Radowagen for their work on this bill, and we'll be hearing from them shortly, I believe. And I'd also like to thank Congresswoman Meng for her ongoing work on strategic sourcing and reverse auctions, and Congresswoman Chu for her ongoing work on bundling and training issues. I especially want to thank Congressman Hanna not only for authoring a provision of this bill, but also for his working as the chairman of the Subcommittee on Contracting and the Workforce. And he also served in that role in the last Congress and did a great job, and that's why he's doing it this Congress, because we really appreciated the work he did last time. Chairman Hanna gathered much of the testimony that led to the creation of this bill, H.R. 1481. And I would ask each of my colleagues to support this amendment so we can continue improving the competitive viability of all small businesses. And I would now like to recognize the ranking member, Ms. Velasquez, for any remarks that she might have on the amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to start off by thanking the Chairman for taking our concerns into account. This committee now has a history of bipartisanship, and I'm glad that we're getting off on a good foot for the 114th Congress. Instances like this show that bipartisanship is not dead and that this committee is a strong example of this. With that said, from our perspective, the amendment in the nature of a substitute is a significant improvement on the initial bill. This is most notable in what it does not include. Provisions regarding size standards, the SBA's Office of Hearing and Appeals, and the agency's Small Business Scorecard were dropped. Doing so sharpens the focus of the underlying legislation on small contractors and the problems they face. The amendment also modified several provisions in the bill. It removes a legislative hammer clause that could have shut down the 7A lending pilot programs if the SBA did not take a certain action. While I do not have a soft spot for the SBA's overuse of its pilot authority, I believe that such retaliation could be counterproductive. A better course will be looking at advancing agency-wide pilot authority reform separately, something that I think both sides of the aisle will have an interest in doing. In addition, the amendment incorporates protections into the joint venturing provision. Why is it necessary to do so? Because time after time, we see non-small businesses use a small business front company to gain access to contracts. The greater emphasis we place on stopping such illicit behavior, the better for legitimate small businesses. Oversight is also incorporated into the language pertaining to non-manufacturing. This will provide greater transparency to the public and Congress as to when the SBA is waiving the rule associated with this authority. Doing so is another way to prevent the misappropriation of small business contracts and reduce the prevalence of front companies. Finally, the same training requirements that are applied to PCRs and business opportunity specialists are also applied to CMRs. Such conditions should be uniform across this position, and I'm glad that the legislation incorporates this principle. Taken together, the chairman should be commended for revising and improving the underlying bill and working to improve the procurement environment that small businesses operate within. Mr. Chairman, there's no doubt in my mind that today we have a better product because of the collective effort of the members from both sides of the aisle, particularly Grace Mann and Mr. Hanna. And I thank you and no doubt that we have a stronger product that I am glad to support. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Generally yields back. Before we go into any additional amendments, are there any statements anybody would like to make on this amendment? If not, are there any other amendments? Gentlelady from California is recognized. For what purpose does the gentlelady seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment that I'd like to offer.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 1 to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1481 offered by Ms.
Without
Hahn of
objection,
California.
the amendment is considered as read, and the gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for your leadership on the legislation under consideration today and your commitment to making this a bipartisan proposal. This legislation addresses a number of concerns that members of this committee on both sides of the aisle have had for a long time in regards to our nation's small business ability to compete fairly to federal contracts. Contracting is one of the most important ways that the federal government can empower small businesses. Every year, federal agencies devote hundreds of billions of dollars to contracts with thousands of businesses across the country. To ensure that our nation's small businesses are given a fair shot to compete for these contracts, the federal government has an annual goal of awarding 23% of all federal prime contract dollars to small businesses. We also have sub-goals to ensure prime contracts are awarded to disadvantaged, women-owned service-disabled veteran-owned, and hub-zone small businesses. Last year, we were all very pleased to see that in 2013, federal agencies met that 23% small business contracting goal for the first time. My question is, are these small business contracts actually going to small businesses? How do we know? A report by the American Small Business League found that Apple, Chevron, Verizon, Bank of America, and Disney all had received small business contracts in 2011. In 2012, the League found that 57 Fortune 100 companies or their subsidiaries were awarded federal small business contracts totaling more than $500 million. If these reports are accurate, it casts real doubt on whether the federal government really is meeting that 23% small business contracting goal. Small businesses should not be unfairly losing out on these valuable contracts to corporate giants. We need to understand why these large companies are receiving small business contracts. Anecdotally, I've heard a number of reasons. Large companies creating shell subsidiaries that appear to be small businesses, and a bureaucratic problem of simply mislabeling business in documentation. So my amendment would call for a GAO study to assess this problem. The study would look at whether federal agencies are accurately identifying the size of businesses awarded these contracts, the impact of these inaccuracies, and what procedures agencies use to identify the size of businesses. The GAO would make recommendations as to how to improve the accuracy of these small business contract reports. The report will be submitted to this committee within a year of this legislation's passage, and I hope that it will give us a better picture of this ongoing problem and a better idea of how to address it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Cabello, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to offer my support for the Hahn amendment. The GAO report will help us have the best data possible with which to make decisions on prime and subcontracting goals. And I appreciate, again, your leadership and the ranking member's leadership on this issue. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Gentleman yields back. Are there any other members who seek recognition? Yes,
Mr. Chairman.
The ranking member is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I would like to thank Congresswoman Hand for her amendment. And while this provision will help increase transparency in small business contract, we must be cautious in requiring too many studies of GAO through legislation, given the agency's limited resources at its disposal. Still, the Federal Procurement Data System holds important information needed to analyze awards to small businesses. However, all too often, the size status of a business is inaccurate or, in some cases, missing. As a result, we do not have a full picture of small business participation. This amendment will not only help us understand why this is happening, but also what can be done to increase the accuracy of the size status designation in the system. With that, I just want to say I strongly support her amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. The gentlelady yields back. Does anyone else seek recognition on either side? If there's no further discussion on the amendment, I'd like to thank the gentlelady from California, Ms. Hahn, for her leadership in offering this amendment, as well as Mr. Cabello, who's offered the topic that this is involved with. Holding agencies accountable for meeting the small business goals only works if we have reliable data. This amendment is a reasonable approach, in my view, to uncover the extent to which the data is reliable and to find ways to improve the quality of the goaling data. And I'm happy to support the amendment. The question is on the amendment offered by Congresswoman Hahn. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. And, excuse me, are there any other amendments?
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment number 2 to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1481.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the gentlelady from California is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair, I applaud the committee's efforts to improve small business contract competition by requiring agencies to assume responsibility for achieving both prime and subprime contracting goals. Putting more emphasis on these subcontracting goals will provide more opportunities for small businesses to compete for these contracts, create jobs, and strengthen our economy. While awarding of prime contracts to small businesses is considered to be the most ideal, subcontracts are an often overlooked but important way of disseminating federal contracting dollars to small businesses as well. My amendment will help shed light on how effective agencies are at utilizing contracting opportunities by requiring reporting and data evaluation on our subcontracting database. In fiscal year of 2013, small businesses received federal subcontracts worth about $86 billion. However, if subcontracting dollars were accurately tracked, I believe this number could be considerably higher. The federal government currently uses two different systems to track subcontracting dollars. Starting next quarter, there will be a new combined system to ease the process of tracking dollars awarded to subcontractors, making it easier to hold agencies accountable to subcontracting opportunities. This streamlined system is a great step in the right direction, and we must capitalize on it by making sure it is operating with accurate data and that it will be equipped to address all the legislative changes that have occurred since the time the systems have been combined. My amendment will ensure accountability for subcontracting results. It will ensure that this new subcontracting reporting system will accomplish the Small Business Act's objectives by requiring the Government Accountability Office to assess the new federal subcontracting system and evaluate whether it is accurately capturing the data necessary to comply with all current statutory requirements within 180 days of implementation of this Act. With that, I ask for the committee's support, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Would the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Corbello, like to comment on this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to offer my support for the Chu amendment. Again, this is another good idea that will strengthen the underlying bill. The GAO report will ensure that the subcontracting data systems meet the requirements of the Small Business Act. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The ranking member is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I want to thank the gentlelady from California for introducing this amendment. As we all know, subcontracting is an important entry mechanism that will allow small businesses to enter the federal marketplace. And if we saw anything during the economic crisis that we face in this nation, while the economy was contracting, federal spending was growing, and the best customer that these small businesses could have is the federal government. And for starters, it could be subcontracting. But unless we know and we have the agency tracking down this number of subcontractors, we will never know whether or not the federal agencies are complying with subcontracting goals. The only way to do it is by conducting this type of studies. And from there, we will make decisions as to what type of legislative remedies or actions needed to be taken by this committee to make sure that subcontractors are treated fairly in the federal marketplace. With that, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Gentlelady yields back. Do any other members seek recognition? If not, I would say that, excuse me, I support the amendment, and I want to thank the gentlelady for offering her amendment. The federal government is expected to launch a new subcontracting reporting system next quarter. I've already sent the responsible agencies a letter expressing my concerns and this committee's concerns that the new system will not adequately capture the statutory requirements in the Small Business Act. This amendment will provide us with the data we need to ensure that the new system captures the necessary subcontracting data. And I'm happy to support the amendment as I indicated. And if there's no further members seeking recognition, the question is on the amendment. Excuse me. Questions on the amendment offered by Congresswoman Chu. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. Are there any other amendments to be offered? If there, the gentleman from Iowa is recognized.
I move to strike the last word on the bill.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say a few words here on the amendment to the amendment, but the underlying bill here and the philosophy that we're working with. And I want to express my gratitude to the people that have worked hard on this and put this language together. It has been a great frustration of my life. I started a construction company out in 1975. We're celebrating our 40th year this year. And one of those frustrations is to bring a little bit of assets to the table and try to find a way that you can do a job for the federal government, and then go around and try to find a partner that you can partner with, and realizing that government grows naturally. It gets big, and naturally people who are administering contracts want to have the large contractors be able to do that work because it's easier for them to administer doing business with a single entity than it is with multiple entities. And so I have spent a fair amount of my business life and my legislative life working in these directions, and it's gratifying to me to sit down here at this committee today and I'll say applaud the people that put this together. So I want to say thank you to the chair and the ranking member and those who brought the amendments, and I'll be looking forward to seeing the results of the studies that come along as well as the results of the underlying legislation. So again, I thank the chairman. I yield back the balance of my time.
Mr. Chairman, I too want to echo that I'm very, very pleased with the gentleman's statement.
Very good. We all get along. Do any other members seek recognition? There being no further amendments, the question is on the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it, and the amendment in the nature of a substitute is agreed to as amended. All right. Now we will go to actually the question on the bill itself, H.R. 1481, as amended. All those in favor of the bill H.R. 1481 as amended, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Appears the ayes have it. The ayes have it in the opinion of the chair. H.R. 1481 as amended is agreed to. And is there any further business to come before the committee? Okay, without objection, I think we are finished with our business here today. So if there's no further business, excuse me one second. Without objection, a quorum being present, the bill as amended is favorably reported to the House. Without objection, the committee staff is authorized to correct punctuation and to make other necessary technical corrections and conforming changes. Have to make sure that punctuation is correct. On that note, I want to thank the ranking member and the members of the committee. Again, this was a bipartisan effort. Both sides contributed to this legislation, and we appreciate the hard work of both sides in this effort. And if there's no further business to come before the committee, we're adjourned. Thank you. Okay, thank you.